Good evening, good morning, wherever you are, and welcome to our monthly Free PGC webinar. Before we start, I'll say a few words about the Free PGC. It's a non-profit organization, and the aim of it is to spread the word about the free principle worthwhile. Before I introduce our two guest speakers tonight, I want to remind you there is a Q&A feature if you're on Google, if you're watching from Google+, and you can type your question, and I'll read them out so they can be answered. Normally on the right top corner of your screen, you should have like a little grid of square. If you hover or click on that, which I don't remember which one, you should be able to access the Q&A feature. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you our two lovely ladies tonight that will be with us. It's Janet Lindsay and Christian McNeill. So Janet is a free principle practitioner, and she has over 20 years experience in the field of personal and organizational change. In 2003, she founded GR Training and Consultancy, also known as GRT&C, as a platform to provide personal and organizational services to the business community, both public and private. GRT&C continues to develop and introduce the most effective and groundbreaking approaches to behavioral and organizational change through training, lectures, and one-to-one coaching. The impact of the services that Janet offers has contributed to the change in service delivery in Staffordshire and West Midlands Protection Trust, Warwickshire Probation Trust, Staffordshire Crown Prosecution Service, who have embraced the elegant and effective methods employed by Janet and her associates. Janet is also the founder of Free2Be Partnership, a social enterprise working with individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds to help improve their community. Janet continues to be a forerunner in the personal change arena by introducing the free principle to probation trust, women support services, and women charities, delivering unprecedented results. So that was for Janet. Christian is the owner of Elements of Wellbeing, a consulting and training practice based on the free principle understanding. For many years, she practiced as a lawyer in Scotland, and following personal challenges in her 20s, she became very interested in how the mind works. This led her to come across the free principle some years ago. She was immediately struck by the outstanding outcomes that they could produce. Having had first-hand experience with stress and pressures, she's passionate about sharing this understanding with others and can attest to its transformative power, having experienced it personally. That's less stress, more contentment, and joie de vivre. She works one-to-one or in group setting, enabling people to access their own resilience and resourcefulness. Both Janet and Christian are going to run a practitioner training in Scotland, which is kind of the breaking new grounds, in September. So now I'd like to pass it on to Christian to start the webinar. Welcome, Christian and Janet.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Karine. Lovely to see you, and it's lovely to be here. Yes, I'm just touching on that point about the being passionate about the personal and professional changes that I've seen through the three principles. I suppose to tell a bit of my story, I first became very interested in how people worked and how they didn't work, specifically me, after a real battle with drinking in my 20s, and that opened my eye. I had no interest in psychology, no awareness, in anything like that, no spirituality, until this personal crisis. And I ended up, after a very difficult time, getting sober, and I've stayed sober since then. And I became very, very interested in different approaches and interventions. And I suppose, looking back, one of the reasons for that was that everything I tried, and I tried and trained in a number of different approaches like NLP, hypnotherapy. I was involved in a 12-step program. None of them seemed to provide a complete answer, and it often seemed like a lot of work, a lot of work just to be okay. And I think after I had that experience of crisis, I saw myself as someone who was kind of damaged and had to work very hard to be okay. That was and I was very willing to do that. I was willing to try different things. So, I learned to meditate. I did TM. I used my different techniques. I trained in Reiki, and there was, I was very willing. And another thing I did was morning pages. So um, it became, quite a full-time job, just working at keeping my head above water. And about 10 years ago, I remember going to a talk which had nothing to do with three principles or anything else that I was involved in. And the guy had this kind of visual, and it was a line across a piece of paper, and the line was the notional line of happiness. And I realised when he was talking about this, he said in his opinion, the majority of people lived below the line of happiness. And I had, what I would now call an insight, because I saw that indeed was true for me. I saw that I had come from real despair in my life at an earlier stage to, but I was still kind of bobbing around at or below the line of happiness. And in that moment, I thought that's going to change. That's not good enough for the rest of my life. And I didn't know how, and but there was something in me that decided that it was going to be different. That the rest of my life was not going to be like that. So that was my kind of interest in the what was ongoing into personal development, psychology, change, transformation, and at the same time, my professional life was in law, and I always worked in essentially areas of deprivation, people with problems. And I spent many years as a criminal lawyer, although I did other type of personal injury work as well. And later I went into the tribunal system, and I became involved in adjudication on disability and incapacity. I worked with doctors. So it was people with chronic conditions, very often depression and anxiety and non-specific kind of back pain. Those kind of things were what we're looking at. And what was becoming clear to me in my professional life was that there seemed to be, it was like a core of people with problems, and they were surrounded by like a donut, a circle of professionals who were supposedly helping them. And I include people like me in that, all sorts of people, from doctors, nurses, health visitors, social workers, probation officers, lawyers, police, just loads and loads of people teachers were kind of charged with improving people's lives. And it became increasingly clear to me that for the time and money involved, it wasn't particularly successful. That change seemed to be the exception rather than the rule. So in my own life, the most effective thing I'd come across up until that point was NLP, and I decided that I would do more. I wanted to do more NLP, and over maybe something like 10 years, build up my practice so I could leave law after my kids had been through university and everything like that. And to that end, about 4.5 years ago, I went to an event in London, which was Grow Your Business, and that was my intention. And in fact, it was all about the three principles. And it hit me like a train. I just absolutely loved it. It seemed like this was the answer to that brought all the missing parts, both in terms of what I saw professionally and also personally. I was very, very struck by the kind of statistics on communities like Modello and Coliseum Gardens. I was astonished by them, actually, the sort of turnarounds that were achieved in those communities. And I wondered why I hadn't come across that, because it was my field, but certainly the prevention and recidivism were, part of my field. I just didn't know how I hadn't heard of this. And the I knew that first weekend that this is what I was going to be involved in for that somehow that this was going to be part of my life from now on. I didn't know I didn't know how, I didn't know I didn't know what was available, where to go deeper, but I just had that deep knowing and certainty. I also got on that weekend. There were several things that really, really struck me, I think, and one of them was that I wasn't broken. I can't even remember who said that, or what the context was, but the truth of that really really penetrated. I saw that insightfully, and it felt so right and such a relief. A real weight was lifted. They used they talked about variable states of mind, and I identified with that. It really helped me. It really helped me to see that my low state of mind and my what I might think or feel or how I might behave in that state really it didn't define me. It was just what happened when people get caught up in their thinking, and there was tremendous freedom in that as well. I didn't need to defend who I was or try and change it or put it right. I could see that I, along with everybody else in the world, was just innocently acting out my thinking in the moment. And of course that the other big thing that became clear to me there was the connection between thought and feeling, because for all these years prior to that, I had seen my feelings as the sort of first go-to place, as a sort of barometer of what was going on in my life, or where I should start, or where changes should be made, where the work should be done in my increasingly onerous program of self-improvement. And this just turned that completely on its head. And I saw, and again, I not only heard someone say it, or various people say it, but I saw the truth of it, that my feelings were nothing more than a reflection of what I was thinking in the moment, and that was always changing. There was nothing precious or valuable about the feelings on their own. So there were really powerful things that hit me. I don't want to go on too much longer at this stage, but what I saw, the other thing I saw that weekend was back to the drawing board. Despite all the qualifications I had in different modalities, it was I knew that I had to become a student again, a pupil again of these three principles. And for something like a year or 18 months or longer, and really I just sought out everything that was going. Tikkun were doing quite a lot in London at that time, with some online things, and I have done intensives with Aaron Turner and Elsie Spittle, all of which has been absolutely wonderful. And in time I started to share this. Then some extraordinary things happened in my own life, just sort of personal circumstances changed, and to cut a long story short, I left law a couple of years ago, and this is now what I do. I met Janet early on and spoke to her, and because she was in the criminal justice field, I was very interested in her work, and we became friends, and I've just loved getting to know Janet. I've sat in or shadowed in some of the groups she's run with women in the Midlands. She was one of our first guest speakers in an event up in Scotland about 18 months ago, and our friendship and collaboration has grown, and we sort of stumbled on the idea of introducing training, and part of this theme of the breaking new ground is looking at it in a slightly different way, and with a different focus, because it's with a focus for people working in the public sector, in particular. With I'll let Janet say more about that. And just this year, all sorts of interesting opportunities have opened to us in the criminal justice sector in Scotland. So we've attended a number of events. We've put on a couple of events in Scotland, including a one-day conference, been supported by other practitioners working in England, Jacqueline Hollows and Dave Ellery. So it's been a very, very exciting time, and I can't wait to see what happens next. I've been invited along to an event at the Violence Reduction Unit in Glasgow running tomorrow, so who knows? And I think that's kind of brought me up to date. So I think enough from me. And Janet, how about hearing from you?
Thanks, Christian, and thanks, Karine, as well, for the introduction and having the opportunity to share with Christian and the work that we're going to be doing together. And on a personal note, my background was from probation. I was a probation manager. I was also an accredited trainer for criminal justice in probation and running out accredited programs. At that time, 12 years ago, when I was still in the organisation, the programs were based on CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, and it had some impact, but not as much long-lasting change. And so in 2003, I left and set up my own business called JR Training and Consultancy. Again, seeking and searching for the best techniques I thought were possible to help people to change. And as I reflect on it now, it wasn't only about helping other people to change, it was helping me to change. Because clearly I thought that there was something more, there was something better, there was a better me. And it was whilst I was on that journey, doing some amazing programs based upon traditional methods, traditional outside-in methods of affirmations in women's programs to enhance self-esteem, just getting people very active and engaged, just to keep their attention, thinking it was very much based upon me and the work I was doing. It was in 2010, whilst I was studying for my Master Practitioner of NLP course with Jamie Smart, that I could hear that he was sharing something different. And as a result of hearing that, I'm very grateful that I heard that I then went to the last day of the first Three Principles Conference when it was held in Tikkun, downstairs in the basement, probably like 150 people there. And I saw Amy Chen Mills introduce her father's video, sharing the work that he'd done in Modello. And what came up in me was, this can change the world. This is what I've been looking for. And it was at that point that I committed to spend the rest of my life learning about this so that I could share it with other people, under the guise of sharing it with other people. But little did I realise that it was for me. And I was very fortunate enough to go on the first programme ran by One Thought in London, first Three Principles based programme. And in Sid Banks' book, where he said that, well, not in his book, but he said you can only share what you have, you can only give what you have. And I didn't realise how much the impact that understanding the principles would have upon me. And it was because of that impact that I could not only see the impact of the principles, but feel and experience the principles. It was that knowing, that understanding and grounding enabled me to take this into criminal justice and to work with female offenders in 2011. And that was the first program I delivered, leaving all my old techniques behind and just sharing the principles. Not that I'd made a conscious decision to leave everything behind, it was because it didn't make sense to share anything else. And so when it's talking about unprecedented results, we had 100% compliance, which was unheard of in probation, but based then probably 30–40% compliance in a group, everybody attending. So we had 100% compliance, 70–80% of the women going on to do some kind of employment training and education. Those were the hard outcomes. The soft outcomes were an increase of well-being, an increase of self-esteem and confidence, so that the women went on to do other things. So since 2011, I have been sharing the principles within criminal justice, primarily within the Midlands, to female offenders, because there are very few resources for female offenders. And in my own journey of continuing to see the principles more clearly, I have been to Salt Spring. I attend the conference in London. I've been to Minnesota. And also in recognizing that I also want to ensure that I can bring the best training to people locally as well. So over the past 3 years, I've brought different speakers to the Midlands once a year. So I had Linda Ramus 3 years ago, Rudy and Jenny last year, and this year we've just finished some practitioner training with Jack Pransky, because I recognise that for myself and for others, it's to ensure that we continue to look in this direction, to continue to look fresh and new. And that also happened in January when attending a training, both Christian and I attended a training with Keith Blevins, and just seeing the principles in a very simplistic way that again just shifted, not shifted, completely obliterated and dismantled everything that I thought I knew about the principles, so that I had to look at it fresh and new again. And so as Christian has said, I think I've known Christian probably about 4 years now, I think, but as friends in the last 18 months and 2 years. And as Christian said, just quite naturally and organically wanting to be of service to people in the public sector, because that's, I say for myself as well, that's where I've come from, and can see not only how this benefits the end user, the offender in my case, or whether it's in health, the patients or whoever, but how it dramatically supports the staff in their day-to-day, whether it's working with the end user, whether it's working with their colleagues, whether it's with their managers in the management team. It's that all-round impact, and keeping it, and both Christian and I wanted to keep it within reach of these organisations financially, whether it be public sector organisation or voluntary or third sector organisation. We wanted to be able to ensure that people would get a quality service at a price that they could, even if it was, reachable for them. So that's why we've created this practitioner training. Yeah, I think we're up to date now. And as Christian said, it's been great fun hanging out with Christian in Glasgow, and some of the work that we've been doing there, and we're saying about breaking new ground, is because there isn't any practitioner training up in Scotland, specifically in Scotland at the moment. And as we said, we want to focus in the public sector, and so it is about bringing something that is little known into an area geographically, into a sector that has very little knowledge about this. And it is how our grounding, our understanding, our knowing that this creates transformation in people. That's what keeps us going, even though sometimes on the outside it may look as if things aren't moving. And Christian's been wonderful in connecting with people and speaking with people in Scotland. Sometimes it may think that nothing's happening, and all of a sudden it's like the doors open, and there are people who are willing to help. And so that's been amazing. That's been wonderful.
Yeah, one of the ideas that we've had is to ask people to contribute to the programme as mentors or guest presenters, and we've just sort of brainstormed to who would we really have liked to have heard from, early on, or as part of a practitioner training, and what trying to create what. Well, certainly from my part, there was nothing going on in Scotland. So trying to create what I would most like to have had myself. So there's been that element behind it. But it is continually evolving, and as Janet mentioned, the impact of the retreat with Keith Blevins and Valda Monroe in January was huge for me too. It was almost as impactful as coming across the principles again, and has been very helpful because of the focus on the three principles paradigm, on the always bringing yourself or the client or the student back to the idea of where is experience coming from in the moment, is thought in the moment being included in that experience. It's made it easier to talk about and to teach and to introduce to people who haven't heard anything about the principles before. And I would say I've noticed, working with clients and with groups, a big change, a quicker uptake, as it were, and less of the questions around. So how do I get to a high quality of mind and that sort of thing that often have arisen during training, during facilitation.
Karen, I was going to say, Karen, I didn't know if there were any questions or if you want us to continue talking, just checking in with you right now.
There is no question yet, but I'm just going to remind people you can ask questions by clicking on the Q&A features. And for people listening on Google+, you should have like a little grid of little square. And on clicking on that underneath, you should have something called Q&A. If you click, then you can type your questions, and I'll be able to see it and read it out. So we don't have any question now, but I'll let you know if we do.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I mean, when Christian and I were thinking about what we wanted to share and what we wanted to talk about, and when we say about breaking new ground, not only is it about taking the work into Scotland, not only is it the program that we want to be delivering, but also it is about our grounding and our understanding, which moment by moment, in understanding and knowing that it's an inside-out world, that it only ever works one way, that there is a single paradigm, that I suppose I began to, get quite blasé. There were certain stories or things that I would fall back on in order to try and explain what mind, thought and consciousness were. And to the extent that last May, coming towards the end of my last contract in the West Midlands, I was starting to feel quite stale in how I was sharing the principles, and I didn't know where else to go, because it's the simplicity, it's the three principles, and so there isn't more knowledge, it's about an understanding. And in knowing that there isn't anything to do, it was to just look in this direction, to I say wait for insights, just to see things more clearly. And I have been fortunate enough to go to Spain and to sit with Jack, and when he was doing his practitioner training there, and have experiences of freshness, experiences which allowed me to have a look and see the principles differently. That when we went on Keith and Valda's training in January, that it felt as if we're seeing the principles fresh and new. Having that uncertainty about what is it that I'm going to share now. Has everything that I've been sharing, has it been nonsense? Where do I go from here? And having that bit of fear, and also being encouraged and grateful that I can see this fresh. And more recently, working with Jack and having Jack in Birmingham, experiencing once again the seeing the principles and the paradigm so much more clearly, and again, not dropping, seeing that what I knew just didn't make sense. And again, wondering, how am I going to share this? How is this going to look? And so in saying about breaking new ground, it's even just recognizing in myself, if we're to see my understanding, my clarity of this, that there are times that it has just looked so fresh and new. I have had to just be in that unknown, wondering what's going to come out of my mouth next. But on this occasion, feeling safe and comfortable in the unknown, knowing that the words will come, knowing that I can see this more clearly, knowing that even at times that it's not even the words. As Sid would say, it's not to listen to my words, but it's just me seeing this paradigm far more clearly. And so for me, when you're talking about breaking new ground, as we've said, and we say it constantly, it always starts with me. And that's what I'm recognizing, is that in myself, seeing the principles fresh, new, is new ground for me.
We have a few questions, Janet and Christian. So I'm going to read the first one from Ellen. I hope I said your name properly, I'm sorry. When you say look in this direction, what do you mean? Do you want me to repeat it?
I think you said that, Janet, so you can answer. I'm happy to come in afterwards.
Thanks. Because when I'm saying to look in this direction, in the past, as a facilitator and trainer, and even within probation, it has seemed as if I've had to do something in order to change. We would call it an outside-in approach, that there are techniques, even in learning NLP, there are things that to be done in order to change our thinking, in order to change how we are, in order to change who we are. That's what I suppose in saying, and looking in a direction, it was looking in that direction to change me. And even the thought that I believe that I needed to do something is again looking at myself in a way that wasn't true, that wasn't real, that needed improvement. When I'm saying looking in this direction, saying about the inside out nature, the single paradigm, it's recognizing that I can only change if I recognize who and what I truly am. I can only change if I recognize that it is an inside-out world. I can only change if I recognize and understand how I work. And so rather than looking for the answers outside of me, looking for the answers from somebody else, it's about always first looking within myself. It's first in recognizing how I'm creating my experience moment by the thinking that I'm taking seriously in that moment. And when I see that is how I work, when I see that is how I create my experience, then I can move, then things change. And so the direction is moving and looking within first, rather than looking outside and hoping to change me.
Thank you, Janet. We have a second question. What tools are you utilizing to bring the free principle in the criminal justice system? For example, video, books, live presentations, webinars, etc. Do you want me to reread the question, Janet?
Oh, is it for me, or I was looking at Christian to see whether Christian?
Either of you, I think.
You could.
I suppose the answer could be any of those. It depends on the situation, and what works for a particular client group. Obviously, and we haven't done any work inside prisons as yet in Scotland. I have had meetings with a couple of prison governors, but there are restrictions on access to IT equipment, mobile phones, computers for prisoners. Although that is a thing that's under review, but it's really no different than anybody else or any other client group, and often. For me, it's a conversational presentation, I suppose, not unlike this. And I often I'm quite visual, so I like a whiteboard, and certainly books. Sid Banks materials can be very helpful. Sid Bank books, and there's a number of other books. I personally like Joe Bailey's Serenity Principle, and my particular issue with addiction and that experience too. And it was an early book that, in fact, I did read years ago, but sadly the principles just didn't grab me at that time in the way that they did a few years ago. Would you say what else would Janet? You've got more experience of running groups of women in probation and so on.
And I think just following on from what you said, it's how it resonates with the group as well. What comes across, and I've been on a journey in the last 4 years of how I share and present the principles. So it depends upon who my mentors were and what program I was on at the time. And so when I've been and this is me. This is completely how I've interpreted things and how I've seen things. So when I was on a program with One Thought, it was very much discussional, a very few resources, just sharing the principles. And so for my very first program, it was very much like that. I think I had a flip chart and a pen just to set out the structure of the program that I designed. But then for 7 weeks at that point, it was really sitting down and having a conversation. Because in my head, I understood that even learning styles are things that we think and we make up. And so rather than trying to hit all the learning styles, I really did. We all sat down in a circle and spoke for 7 weeks, about 15 hours in total. And to date, that was the most impactful program I've ever had. It was just me, flip chart, sitting down, and very little else, and engaging 10 women who, and again, you've got to remember, these are people who've been ordered to come on a program. They're within a system that in the time that they committed an offence, they truly believed that they were doing the best thing that they could. And so to sit down and to come into a program thinking not knowing what to expect, and to engage 10 women just in discussion was unprecedented. Now, over time, what has happened again is what feels good. How would it, what resonates with a group? And so for some women, and working in the community, I've been able to take my projector in and show some of the clips of women in prison off the Three Principles movie site. And that's had some wonderful impacts on certain groups because they can resonate, they can identify with the women in prison, the women in the videos. And more recently, in order to continue and to reinforce the learning that happens in the group, I have started to give books out. I give out Sydney Banks's book, A Missing Link, and I also give out Jack Pransky's book, Somebody Should Have Told Us. And that works well with certain groups as well. So as time's gone on, as my grounding has shifted and changed, how I deliver and what I leave with people, that's changed as well. And so when we deliver in Scotland, and as Christian said, we continue to evolve. Who knows what we'll be giving out by So
Thank you. We have another question from Wim. What would you say is or was the biggest obstacle or challenge to bringing this understanding into the criminal justice system?
I think the biggest challenge is people not is getting over what I would call people's confirmation bias. So we did an event with about 20 people all across criminal justice a few weeks ago, and it seemed to be well received. And one of the things we did was we showed a video of one of Janet's previous clients, which is on YouTube, and I think it's called Rebecca, Abuse and Abduction, if anybody wants to Google it. But it's a short video, it's about 6 or 7 minutes, and Rebecca had a very shocking story of abuse as a young person, and then a number of decades of really all sorts of problems in terms of mental health and offending, and ended up on Janet's first course, I think. Is that right, Janet? And had a complete turnaround, and spoke at the conference a couple of years ago, and a very powerful speaker now. And after the event, I mean, I think it's one of the most impactful videos that I've seen of transformation. And after the event, a woman from one of the prisons came up and asked us if she thought that this work could be helpful with her clients who were really, really damaged. And what she had unconsciously and automatically done was, because Rebecca is so so present, so so easy to listen to, so impressive, I think she'd been unable to imagine that she could ever have been anything else. And so she distinguished her own clients, her own people in prison that she works in, from Rebecca. And it was interesting because she was a very pleasant person. She was open to an extent. She didn't know that she'd done this, and she found it very hard to see that that this could help the people that she worked with too. She was so entrenched, unwittingly, innocently, and automatically, in the view that her clientele were damaged beyond help and beyond hope. So I think that's possibly the biggest hurdle, that people have very fixed ideas and which include limitations on how effective anything can be. So the sort of yeah. Janet, what would you say?
Yes, I think in echoing what you said there about people's limited thinking, because it also limits people in seeing beyond what we're saying, in as much as there is evidence of how effective CBT is, or mindfulness, or these things, as ineffective as they are, there's evidence around about it. And so sometimes some commissioners are reluctant to take a risk on introducing and bringing something new in to the organisation that hasn't got an evidence base. Over the last 4 years, I've been working with Linda Ramus and have got some very early evaluations looking, using some standardised questionnaires such as the World Health Organization Wellbeing Scale, Rosenberg Self-Esteem Scale, also the SB1, I think, just in order to try and measure an understanding of the principles as well. So we've got some early indications of how effective this is, and so we've got some numerical evaluation, not evidence, evaluation, showing that there's significant changes in self-esteem, confidence and well-being. And so we're able to present those early findings if people need some kind of written evaluation. The way in which in the past I've gotten around that introduce the principles into different organisations is to introduce it as innovative. Most organisations do have a fund for innovation, and so the principles can fall quite naturally and nicely within that, because it's something that they haven't really heard of, or it sounds like something, so they've got an innovation budget just to pilot something new. And also what I would say is my own or our own grounding can also be a barrier. If we're not clear about how we're going to present within that sector, if we're not clear about the benefits to the individual and the organisation, because again, within criminal justice, their clear aims are to reduce reoffending, rehabilitation into the community, and protection of the public. And it's also about ensuring that we can see with our grounding how the principles helps an organisation to achieve their outcomes as well.
Thank you. No more questions for now, but for people watching, you can ask any question you want. I will read them out. So if you want to add anything, it's all up to you.
It's interesting. I was yesterday. I was just poaching around, and I think I maybe just sent or failed to send you my bio, Karine, and I was thinking about three principles and the training and the work in criminal justice, and I heard something. I just happened to be listening to something in the background, and it was a quote from a yoga teacher, Yogi Bhajan. I'd never heard of him before, and it was that he said, "I'm not here to collect students. I'm here to create teachers." And I thought I wanted to sound as too grandiose or put myself in the same category as that guy, but I thought there is something about this. I was struck right away about how incredibly powerful the three principles could be, and it's I suppose it's puzzled me a little bit about why it seems to have taken a long time, since over 40 years since Sid had his experience, and although in one way it's worldwide, in another way it's very patchy and little known. One of my mentors was very clearly of the view, and I think that's probably right, that the spirit, the formless nature of the principles, the spiritual nature of the principles, is part of that, where there isn't, because there's no technique and because there's no form, and that may well be right, but it seems to me that one of the things that has to happen to get it out there, and for other people to experience the kind of contentment and sense of security and peace that I've had in my life in the past few years is for there to be more teachers, and for people to support each other in that. I have absolutely loved collaborating with people since I've come into the principles. I've loved collaborating with Janet. I also collaborate with Lynn Robertson up here. We've set up a Three Principles Scotland and had run groups and had speakers and so on. But it's so enjoyable. It's such a brilliant way I found for me to deepen my own grounding, and I think it's kind of summarised by the last event we did. Janet and Dave were staying at my house, and in the morning we all in our pyjamas kind of congregated on Janet's bed, and we were busy preparing for the day. And completely unbeknown to me, Dave and I were both, looking at our devices and, sorting out what we were going to do. And Janet took a picture of us all in our pajamas and posted it on Twitter, and with the tagline, "Preparing for today's meeting." And and it was just, it just summarised it for me, because we genuinely were, and we were genuinely engrossed in it, and we were connected, and we were getting ready, but it was so relaxed. It was such fun, and it was also very effective, and we did have a great day. So yeah, I really love that aspect of it, and I am passionate about not just sharing it with other people, but supporting them and being able to share it more widely. I love that, the idea of that ripple effect going out and out and out, and that's what, you know, I very much want to be part of.
Yeah. It's brilliant that you say that, Christian. As you said, just in working together has been wonderful, and more recently for me also, recognizing and working with people who don't know the principles as well. More recently, meeting up with people who are in and around criminal justice, some of those voluntary and third sector organisations that provide services to offenders, and speaking with them, speaking with people who work with, say, the end user, with offenders, and working in collaboration with those organisations. A wonderful example of that as well is Jacqueline Hollows, who's going to be going into prison, and we're going to be working together on that. But she's working in partnership with a drug agency that isn't three principles based, but it is working in partnership with other organisations, not only for us to share the principles and provide a service to the end user, but to also share it within the partnership organisations as well. It is, as Christian was saying, about creating more teachers, more of us growing together. The way in which we share the principles, we could inadvertently be creating teachers without us knowing it, with us sharing our understanding, working within organisations, not just teaching it, but working alongside people who have no understanding of the principles. Quite naturally, they start talking about it as well within their families, to their colleagues. And so it is very important to strike up alliances across the board. Yes, I love working with Christian. I love working with three principles-based facilitators, because it is like coming home. And it's also wonderful to be able to share this with somebody who has no understanding of the inside-out nature of who we are, so that they too can share it within their teams, within their organisations.
Thank you, ladies. We don't have any more questions, so I think everybody is in a nice place. Either they're shy or they're in a nice place. I'll go for the second one. We're in a nice place. So if you want just to add something or to wrap it up, please feel free. Go from there.
Do you want to? Shall I say something? It's perfectly planned duo that we have. How we work together, it's fabulous. It's seamless.
Yes, I think I have. I don't think I have anything very much else to say. I'm looking forward to the conference in London this coming weekend. So I have no idea who's on the call, but please do come and say hello if you're there. And I think that's just about all I've got to say at the moment. Janet, what about you?
For me, just want to say that, Christian and I will be available to contact us. We're going to be putting on a webinar probably in a couple of weeks' time, just to share. You're going to say something. Just to share more about the practitioner program, our heart behind it, why we're putting this together, and who we want to have as mentors on our program as well. So yes, and just to say, thank you, Karen, for asking us, because it gave, first of all, it's wonderful for Christian and I to share together virtually on 3PGC, and to share and just to continue to update our journey, my journey and our journey, just to show how it's not only what we do and how we share the principles, but it's our own understanding of the principles, how that continues to become even more clear, and as such it then has an impact on what and how we share with other people, and also the new directions the new ground that we do continue to break and seeing things more clearly.
Mm.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jan and at Christian. There's one more comment from Wim. He say awesome.
Thank you, Wim. Thank you.
And I can just, completely agree with that. He was awesome. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for the two of you to have joined, and a bit last minute too. So it's fantastic. And for everybody, I hope to see you next month where we have Joe Bailey, and have all a fantastic, rest of the week, rest of the month. And thank you very much, lady. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye.